Hi, this is Sky Nelson, teacher and parent in West Contra Costa Unified School District. I want to share information that I've gathered over the past number of months from the budget files on Socrata, WCCUSD.Socrata, and also from the school board website. Um, Feeling a little rushed to get this video out and make it simple. But the important thing here is that my group of friends and colleagues have sought for a common narrative, sought for understanding what's the non slanted view of the what's been happening with the budget. We've been fighting for the last 8 months over like $7 million in the budget. What we found is that aside from a number of just learning about the budget, which has been great, there's a chronic underfunding in some programs like special education on the order of 17, $18 million a year, something like that. I'm not a financial analyst. I'm not going to say how much, but it's larger than the amount we're going into deficit every year, from what I can tell. And this is an unacceptable, to be arguing over smaller amounts than we're underfunded by the government every year is not a mismanagement problem. It's a systemic problem that we're having to cover the costs of. And we also found that the amount we're being shortchanged every year by the federal government is on the order of how much we originally borrowed from to go into receivership in 1991. So the entire history of and the interest paid on that loan process, paying for the people that came to monitor us, is all part of this double standard of keeping us really, really tight in the purse and but not holding the federal government to that account and being stuck in the middle. So our budget snapshot on FCMAT, the FCMAT organization that oversees us, and the SPED, Special Ed Funding Gap. I hope this is helpful information. Our goals are that some of these issues have been true for many years or decades. We're not trying to uncover some new finding necessarily. This time in history is interesting and unique for our particular challenges. Our goal is to share historical information to show that these outcomes are not a mystery. There's a sense in the community that we don't know why we're in this situation. It seems very clear to me, very predictable. We have relied on documents from WCCUSD School Board, FCMAT, California Department of Ed, and numerous veterans of the community. These numbers are a ballpark for simplicity, but I think they tell an accurate story. And we've gotten feedback from some board members and other folks that these are, not to be necessarily argued with, but what's the story they tell? Our goal is to correct systems, not people, by finding a common narrative we can agree on. Um, we don't believe that any one person is at fault for this situation that we're in, but that the system itself is perpetuating inequities and double standards that we're paying the price for. So the timeline or history of this district in this regard is 1991. We received a loan went into receivership with the state. This organization called FCMAT, FCMAT, was established to oversee that. We paid for them to come in and oversee our um, school board and make sure that we were, above board and doing things well. We actually paid those fees. In 2012, we finally paid off the loan after 21 years. In 2020, the flags were raised again, re-triggered because of three consecutive conditional reports or poor weather reports. But there's a partial overlap with the pandemic, so it's important to note that a global situation that affected everybody in dramatic measure was at least partially overlapping with that triggering of our oversight again. So there's some unfairness there that needs to be accounted for. Our risk score was only 36% at that time, less than the 40% threshold. But because of these three reports in a row that were not good enough, we got triggered, flagged. One-time COVID funds came in to temporarily stabilize the budget. In 2023, there was another flag issued when the county superintendent said we had a problem. They issued a letter of lack of going concern, put us back into repair mode. And in each of those cases, it's important to realize that the law says that the superintendent must take action, and the action one of the actions they can take is um, signing a waiver to bypass funding classroom minimum requirements. And that's what they did. And so it's not, I would say, any single person's fault that this happened, but the system itself is inflexible to the needs of the district and the double standard of the funding from the federal government, and just applying these laws, ruthlessly in a way. And everyone's working within their lanes, applying the law, not seeing the impact on the bigger picture and the conditions that were causing this. And as a result of the pandemic, special ed's needs became more pronounced post-COVID, and costs have risen steadily without any increase in federal funding. So the current budget actuals for the SPED are something like this. This is a combination of data from the current and from a couple of years ago, just to make it work. They haven't published the current actuals yet on the website, although we do have pictures of them from the meeting. Total SPED program cost is about 120 million. Again, ballpark numbers. IDEA, the funding for individuals with disabilities. Federal revenue is about $8 million, which is about 7% of the total. COVID funds are, or some kind of funds that are in the budget that are federal funds are 17 million. So the total federal funding is like 25 million that's applied to SPED. The unrestricted transfer to SPED to cover the rest of the 120 million is about $92.5 million to cover the program. So we're spending 92.5 million of unforeseen dollars or uncompensated dollars from the federal government on it's foreseen, but it's not compensated by the government on special education. IDEA is 40% is an aspirational target that the government suggests to contribute for the to enact the law, but it is not a legal requirement. So we're up against every school in the country, I think, has been faced with not being paid the full amount since it was passed. These federal contributions in 2022 and 23 were here on the document that you can find on the website of the school board. You can see special education entitlement and discretionary grants are like 5.5 million and 1.9 million. Down below, you have all other federal revenue, that's 17.5 million down here. And those are all contributing to what we pay out of the restricted funds for special education. The rest of it is coming from our unrestricted funds, which are pulling away from whatever other decision we want to make about where those are spent. Per student cost is just illustrative. I don't think this calculation is what's done by financial analysts, but I thought it was helpful to understand. Our LCFF ADA daily attendance revenue is about 12,500 per student per year for one student average cost to come to school. That's what we get reimbursed, at least. Our total SPED students are about 5,000. And the 120 million was the cost of the special education program, if you remember. So 120 million divided by 5,000 is about 24,000 per SPED student. And if FCMAT is this organization that wants us to do better and to regulate ourselves better and to manage our funds better, shouldn't they want to address this systemic lack of funding rather than just penalize us when they issue letters that waive the requirements that we spend money in the classroom and making it very difficult to have any less than 3% of our reserves in the bank? It puts constraints on our district that puts us at a systemic disadvantage and essentially penalize us instead of helping us address this systemic inequity for funding for SPED from the government. What the 40% of extra cost would mean, extra cost is about 57 million. That's the cost above the average daily cost of a student that would be necessary for the needs of SPED students. And it's important to acknowledge and recognize that we very clearly in our district name that special ed students are mainstream students first. So they get treated as everyone else. And they do have different needs in the classroom, which have extra costs. And that's what we're talking about. Federal government has promised to spend 40% of that extra cost on us, which would be about 26 million. And what we're getting is about 8 million. So that's a shortfall of about 18 million annually that we're not being paid, that we should be paid in order to fund the program that was mandated by the federal government. So a scale check on the recent cuts. The annual IDEA underpayment is on the scale of tens of millions of dollars, as we just saw, 18 million or so, something like that. 1991 state bailout loan was only $29 million, which could have been covered in 2 years from the just being paid by the government what we're due. Recent cuts of $7 and $6 million over 2 years in the district that I was present for last, February, is less than the 1 year SPED funding gap. So we're arguing over a small amount of money compared to what we're being underpaid by the government for our required programs. And the parcel tax that we're renewing and spending all our time on this year is only $10 million a year. So again, very small in relationship to the big problem here, which is the double standard from the government funding. SPED funding has gone up from 22 million to 38 million to 92 million over the past 15 years or 10 years or so. Our bottom line and policy questions, we're haggling over cutting $7 million a year when we're being underpaid when federal mandates by 3 times that every year. Chronic SPED underfunding by Fed and oversight triggers by state strain our general fund. Defining a clear off-ramp from high-risk status, so we're not being triggered by things like overlap with conditions that's external to us, like COVID, forgiving the automatic trigger during COVID in the past, which has led to downstream effects that we can't really quantify. Encouraging thorough evaluation of causes regarding special education. Is FCMAT helping us solve or just penalizing? And rejecting the takeover mentality that when issues are systemic rather than mismanagement, we shouldn't have people coming in and telling us what to do with our budget. And there should be no waivers for paying less in the classroom if we're not going to have waivers for lessening our reserves. So paying having money in the bank for reserves is not more important, and paying off the satisfying the loan oversight people the oversight people is not more important than paying for the things we have in the classroom. So we need to balance those needs. And aligning budget timelines, layoff, interim reports, and grants all come at different times. Layoff notices are in March. Interim reports are like throughout the year and in June. Grants come due in August. And we're supposed to sort of balance the reserves the whole time at some, city level. And there's a sense of whiplash, like we can never quite know what each number is going to be until it comes. So the core problem is a double standard. We're being dinged for occasional budget infraction of only several $1 million against our cushion. We're regularly covering costs for federally mandated programs up to several tens of millions of dollars. And just a full summary of possible ideas, community-focused budget and funding policy ideas. I'm not saying that I know these are going to work, but this is what it seems to me and the people I've talked with, that parents and teachers and students, these are reasonable conclusions to draw. Special education funding. Advocate for federal government to fulfill its promise of contributing 40% of excess SPED costs, which would add $18 million annually compared to current levels. Push for state level acknowledgement that chronic SPED underfunding is systemic, not mismanagement, to avoid punitive measures. Require transparent reporting of unrestricted transfers into SPED, currently $92.5 million a year. Number 2, oversight and risk status. Define a clear off-ramp from high-risk status, disregard automatic COVID-era triggers, align oversight to support solutions, not impose penalties when shortfalls are due to underfunding, reject a takeover mentality, prohibit waivers that bypass classroom minimums as a long-term fix. Budget timing and stability, synchronize budget deadlines, layoffs, interim reports, grants, parcel tax timelines to reduce financial whiplash. Ask for a waiver to be exempt from reserve requirements. Remember, our original loan was on the same order as the amount we are underpaid every year by the federal government. It's a double standard. Okay, and revenue and cuts. Protect classrooms by limiting cuts. Recent $13 million in reductions are small compared to SPED gaps. Renew and strengthen the parcel tax, $10 million a year as part of the funding base. Equity and double standards. Address the double standard. Districts are penalized for minor budget infractions in the millions of dollars while absorbing massive SPED underfunding, tens of millions. And requires state and federal agencies to weigh mandated program costs before triggering sanctions, like the special education requirement in IDEA. Community and advocacy. Build coalitions with city councils, other districts, Oakland and Vallejo, and statewide leaders, Thurman, Joya, and Wicks. Advocate at the federal level with Congress, DeSaulnier and Garamendi, for structural SPED funding reform. And engage unions and associations, CTA, CSBA, and health agencies, CCC, Department of Health, in a coordinated advocacy push. Let's turn together towards Sacramento and Washington, D.C., prioritize community unity over internal disputes, and focus on solutions, not FCMAT's past actions. create a shared narrative based on accurate history to build trust and common ground. Let's turn ourselves towards DC, Sacramento, and make policy changes together rather than thinking the rules are just set what they are. Let's fight for what we think is the right outcome for our students and for our district and for the fair treatment of our community. Um, so here's a code to some of the work we're doing if you want to join the project plan for how to get involved with organizing, and let's work together. It's an unacceptable situation, and the community, I think, needs to at least know what the bottom line is, so it's not a mystery. That's my intention. Thank you. Have a good day.